November 141,965. What if, in the first seconds of dawn, you could hear the jungle breathe, feel the ground tremble with unseen footsteps, and know that by nightfall men would be screaming for medics, while shadows dragged the wounded into tall grass? Would you still step forward without hesitation? On that humid morning in the Drang Valley, Sergeant Major Basil L. Plumley, a hardened US Army paratrooper with scars earned across 2 wars, stood at the edge of history as the opening shots of America's first major battle of the Vietnam War cracked through the air. And from the very start, his presence carried an almost supernatural weight among the men of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, because Plumley was not just a senior enlisted leader, he was a walking embodiment of survival. Discipline and raw battlefield instinct forged long before Vietnam in the frozen misery of Korea and the brutal rigor of airborne service. And now, as helicopters chopped the air and dropped soldiers into landing zone X-ray, he moved through the chaos with calm menace, correcting weapons grips, barking orders, and locking eyes with young troopers who had never been shot at before, making them believe they could endure what was coming. Within hours, North Vietnamese forces swarmed the perimeter in human wave assaults that seemed endless, and as bullets ripped through elephant grass and mortar rounds churned the earth into blood-soaked mud, Plumley repeatedly exposed himself to fire, dragging men into fighting positions, forcing terrified soldiers to stand and shoot when their minds were breaking. And during one desperate moment, when a medic crawled through open fire to reach a wounded infantryman only to be cut down beside him, Plumley seized the fallen man's weapon, laid down suppressive fire, and physically hauled the injured soldier back, while rounds snapped inches from his head, an act witnessed by survivors who later swore it felt like death itself was stalking the battlefield, and Plumley had chosen to walk straight through it. As night fell on November 14 and bled into November 15, the valley turned into a nightmare landscape, where flares revealed bodies frozen in unnatural positions, and the screams of the wounded echoed through darkness so thick it felt alive. And in this horror, Plumley enforced order. No panic, no wasted movement, no retreat, moving trench to trench, checking ammunition by touch, whispering curses and encouragement in equal measure. Even standing upright at times when everyone else hugged the dirt, daring the enemy to take him, because fear to him was something to be crushed before it infected the line. One chilling account describes Plumley encountering a young soldier shaking uncontrollably beside a corpse whose eyes were still open, and instead of comfort, he shoved a rifle into the soldier's chest and growled that the dead man couldn't fight anymore, but he still could. A brutal truth that snapped the soldier back to reality and likely saved lives. And as dawn broke after a night of relentless probing attacks, the ground around LZ X-ray was littered with enemy dead so close to American lines that some appeared to have been reaching for soldiers when they fell, an image that haunted survivors for decades. Plumley continued to lead through the following days of combat, coordinating resupply under fire, enforcing perimeter discipline, and ensuring wounded men were evacuated despite incoming rounds, all while refusing to leave the field himself. And it was this relentless, almost fearsome dedication that later inspired his portrayal in popular war cinema. Though no screen could fully capture the raw terror of those moments when the enemy seemed to melt out of the jungle like ghosts, and the line between life and death was measured in seconds. Basil Plumley retired years later, after more than 3 decades of service, carrying with him the memories of men saved and men lost, a warrior whose methods were harsh, but whose results were undeniable, because at Drang, where the US Army first learned how brutal Vietnam would be, his leadership helped hold the line against overwhelming odds. Yet the question still lingers like the echo of gunfire in that valley. Was Plumley a product of war? Or was war itself shaped by men like him who refused to yield even when surrounded by darkness? And what do you think truly kept those soldiers alive when the jungle closed in and the night turned into pure horror?